Yo, YouTube, what's up with your boy? Sports and Fitness Rants. I'm back, guys. Click that like button. Subscribe to my channel. What's up, y'all? Welcome back, guys. Welcome back. Got another great video for you guys today, as usual, man. Listen, you guys know the deal on this channel. We must continue to set the record straight, right? Stand up, stop the lies, stop the narratives, y'all, right? Stop them from rewriting the history. And in this video, we're going to talk about that. Because, when we're talking about these guys constantly, talking down on previous eras, right? I want to talk and think or focus on what would the NBA be like today if the NBA never brought in three-point line? Where would the NBA players of today be without the NBA three-point line, right? And that's all due to the previous eras, right? We think about the ABA, right? The 80s, and right, they're bringing the three-point line in the 80s, right? Where would this NBA be without the three-point line, guys? We're going to talk about in this video. And I want to thank you guys, everyone across the world, everyone across the states, guys, has been supporting my channel. I am truly, truly humbled, guys, by all support out there. For real, man. It means a lot, guys. Much respect to all you guys. Shout out to everybody in the membership. It means a lot. Once again, truly humble all the support, guys. We must continue to stand up. And you guys know what to do. Turn the volume all the way up. Hit that play button. Remember, these videos are for educational purposes. And let's roll. So, yes, guys, like I said, where would the NBA... where would this era be without the three-point line? Where would it be? This entire era of basketball has been nothing but three-point shooting and free throws. A lot of isolation basketball, a lot of carrying of the ball, right? A lot of traveling and three-point chucking. That's what this era is in a nutshell. When you look at the All-Star game, it's a perfect, right? It highlights all these things, right? Or it magnifies all this, right? We look at the All-Star game. These guys shot, 170-plus three-pointers in that All-Star game. Right? No defense being played. Guys are not even sprinting. They were out there jogging around, laughing, goofing off. This is the NBA right now, guys. The All-Star game was literally the NBA magnified. All the problems with the NBA was magnified in the All-Star game, right? It was a laughingstock. It was a joke. It was an embarrassment, man. So when we think about the three-point line and we think about where would the NBA be today without the three-point line, guys? Because when I talk to you guys about the 80s and the 90s, some of these previous eras, what they had was balance. They had balance, guys, right? When we think about just the 90s specifically, let's think about, right? I told you guys, what about the specialists? We think about that. That goes to the balance of the game, right? You had three-point specialists, guys who specialize in catch and shoot, or guys who specialize in perimeter shooting. That was their thing. They were shooters. Right? Maybe not off the dribble. Like I said, maybe it was coming off of screens or catching and shooting, but they specialize in that. When they were on the court, you couldn't leave those guys open. I told you had guys who specialized in high flying. They were high flyers, athletic guys who used their athleticism to their advantage, right? You had great defensive players. You had defensive specialists, right? You had not just only great defensive players, great two-way players, but you had defensive specialists, guys who specialized in playing gritty, tough defense, right? And hustling, right? You had all those kinds of guys, or glue guys that you needed on your teams for your team to be successful. Every team had those guys, right? Along with a star player, maybe even two-star players. But there was balance in the game, right? Guys had post-up games, right? If you were a big man back in those days, then more likely than not, you had some kind of post-up game, some post-up move. You had a go-to move in the post that you could go to with consistency. This goes to the balance of the game. It wasn't everyone out there just chucking threes, right? Or everyone playing iso ball. You had coaches that ran actual systems. Guys did not need to dominate the basketball to be effective. Right? Michael Jordan did not need to dominate the basketball to be effective. Reggie Miller did not need to dominate the basketball to be effective. Clyde Drexler, Hakeem Olajuwon, they did not need to dominate the basketball to be effective. Right? What they had was a balance. These guys did not need the ball in their hands. They could play off the ball. Right? They played in systems. They allowed their teammates to what? Help them to be successful. Guys had roles. There were role players. Today, no one wants to be a quote-unquote role player. No one wants to be that. Everyone wants to be the star. Everyone wants to get millions of dollars. Everyone wants to be the famous person. But no one wants to do all the dirty work, right? Most people don't want that. Defense is not sexy, right? It doesn't get all the fame. So no one wants to do these things. So once again, if it wasn't for the previous eras, the guys in the 80s, the guys in the 90s, right? The ABA bringing the three-point line, right, into the NBA with that merger, if it wasn't for that, where would the NBA be today? So once again, this exposes the idea we done with the 90s or we done with the 80s, we done with the 70s, whatever they want to say. They're done with the previous eras. They look down on previous eras as not being that great. But without the previous eras, this era would be nowhere. Because once again, without the merger of ABA and NBA, without the ABA bringing the three-point line to prominence in the NBA, without the NBA bringing the three-point line into the 80s, implementing that in the 80s, and without the players utilizing the three-point line the way that they did, there would be no three-point line today, guys. There wouldn't be no three-point line. If the guys back in the 80s, when they first brought the three-point line in, if they abandoned all conventional basketball play and just started playing this kind of basketball, I guarantee you the NBA would not be where it is today. It would not be a global game. It wouldn't be popular. Nobody would be watching it. The facts are that the game was more balanced back then. So you had more ways for fans to be attracted to the game. There were different styles. Now, if you're not a fan of three-point chucking, then you can't watch the game. And when you hear people say, oh, I'm a fan of the scoring, what scoring? What scoring? To me, the scoring is not impressive. It's guys just chucking up shots. I'm not impressed with the quote-unquote scoring of today's era. And this is what you hear a lot of fans talk about. Oh, I like this era because of the points that they score. What? They scored a lot of points in the 60s too. But how come you guys don't want to bring up the 60s guys? They were scoring in the 110s, the 120s all the time back then. But no one wants to talk about this stuff, right? Even the 80s, they scored over 100 points regularly, 105, 110. But they want to talk about the points today is what makes the game exciting? How is it more exciting when guys are scoring more points, but there's no defense? To me, it's more impressive when guys are scoring under more resistance. Like I've told you, think about this, for example, guys. In the 90s, right? Let's think about the late 90s. Michael Jordan was averaging about 30 points a game, right? But the Bulls were only averaging about 90, 95 points a game. So what's more impressive? Michael Jordan averaging 30 when his team is only scoring 90, or someone averaging 30 today when their team is averaging 120 points a game? What's more impressive? To me, it seems like it was more impressive what Michael Jordan was doing, what other guys in those eras were doing. They were scoring a larger percentage of their team's points, and they were doing it under stricter defensive rules, right? They were also doing it under more physical defense, where guys actually cared about defense. They took pride in defense. They gave the effort consistently. That's more impressive to me. So when people talk about the scoring being impressive, no, it's not. They're just chucking up shots. No one's playing defense. That's not impressive, guys. It's not. I want to see guys playing defense. I want to see guys earning it, working for their points, getting banged around, thinking about having to go into that paint, making a business decision. So once again, where would the NBA today be without the previous eras and that three-point line being introduced? Where would it be, right? Without the previous eras utilizing the three-point shot, right, with balance, not abusing it. Right? Because look where we're at now, right? Did guys flop in previous eras? Yeah, they flopped. But once again, the degree of flopping was very, very minor. It wasn't that much. That's why they didn't have flopping guidelines. It wasn't an issue. The same thing with the load managing, right? Did guys rest games or did guys sit out a game? Maybe they were sore or whatever. Yeah, guys missed games once in a while. But once again, it was very, very rare that these guys missed a game. They had to have a significant injury or be dealing with an injury to miss a game. And once again, they were not missing many, many games. They're missing a couple of games. That's it. Most of the guys took pride in playing 82 games. So what do we have now? Guys have to play a minimum of 65. They had to come up with a restriction, a minimum requirement for these guys now because they don't want to show up to work. And then we think about the three-point line. The game itself has not evolved. It's devolved. And the game is not exciting to watch anymore. It's boring. The ratings are down. No one wants to watch this nonsense. And the players of today never want to give the homage to the players of previous eras that laid the foundation out for them. The money that they're getting today, it's all from guys in previous eras, right? All the freedom that these guys are dealing with now, it all comes from previous eras, right? The free agency, that was all from previous eras. These guys worked, these guys earned it for them, and these guys have abused it. Michael Jordan and some of these other players, they opened doors for these guys. The Magic Johnsons, the Larry Birds, the Dr. J's, right? The Oscar Robertsons. These guys opened doors for these players in different avenues, but then they want to disrespect the previous eras by saying they couldn't play. Once again, where's the NBA now without a three-point line? Where is it? What are we going to be watching? What are you watching without the three-point line? You'll be watching actual basketball then without the three-point line because once again, these guys have abused it. They've abused the three-point line. You know what? I think I have an idea for what to do with the three-point line in the NBA right now. I've heard people say to get rid of it. Not necessarily get rid of it or move it back more. No, none of those things. What I think they should try to do is use the three-point line in temporary situations. So what do I mean by that? So the game is 48 minutes long, right? That's an NBA game, 48 minutes, right? 12 minutes for each quarter. Let's say that we only allow three-pointers to be shot during the first 2 minutes of the quarter and the last 2 minutes of a quarter, right? So that at the beginning of a quarter and the end of each quarter, the three-point line will be there, right? But after that, there is no three-pointers counted. You could do something like that. That changes it up. That forces these players to not just stand behind the three-point line all game and just chuck up threes all game, right? It only will work in a couple of minutes, either before or the end. You could do in the middle, whatever. But that's what I think would be great, to make the three-point line a temporary thing during the game, where it's not there all game. It's something that comes every once in a while, and you can utilize it when it's there. I think that would be a great idea, man. But when we think about the three-point line, guys, let's think about this. We all know the three-point line was instituted during the 79-1980 season. That was the first season that the NBA brought in the three-point line. But a lot of people don't know the first three-pointer made in the NBA Finals was made by Dr. J, guys. A lot of people don't realize that. In the 1980 NBA Finals, Dr. J made the first three-pointer in the finals. It was Dr. J, right? No one think about Dr. J as a three-point shooter, but he was the first player to make a three-pointer in the NBA Finals. I believe Chris Ford is credited with making the first ever three-point shot in NBA's history, just in a regular season game. I believe it was Chris Ford. I believe Rick Barry was the first player. I think he had the most three-pointers in a game. And I want to say he had 8 three-pointers in a game. That was the record for a long time. Rick Barry, we all know Rick Barry's a shooter. But Rick Barry had 8 3-pointers in a game. And the first player to make, I wrote this down, the first player to make 100 three-pointers in a season was Danny Ainge, guys. Danny Ainge, the first player in NBA's history to make over 100 three-pointers in a game. In a season. And what's funny about that is you often hear a lot of these, fake NBA fans who don't know about the history. They'll often mention Danny Ainge as a slow, unathletic white guy. Oh, Michael Jordan was guarded by Danny Ainge. Or Danny Ainge, who's Danny Ainge? And once again, I've told you guys, they don't realize that Danny Ainge was a 3-sport all-state athlete in Oregon. The man was all-state wide receiver. So if you're a wide receiver and you're an all-state football wide receiver, you got to be pretty damn athletic to do that, guys. All right? He was also an all-state baseball player and obviously all-state in basketball. He might have even been all-American in these things. I don't remember. But he was the only player in Oregon history to be all three, right? To be all-state or all-American in all 3 sports as a sophomore, guys. I believe to this day he's the only player in Oregon State history to do that. Oregon is a huge state. So obviously Danny Ainge was an amazing athlete, guys. He was also drafted to the Major League Baseball and to the NBA. So he could have played 2 sports professionally. But they'll say that Danny Ainge was not an athlete. It's a joke, guys, an absolute joke. But Danny Ainge was the first professional basketball player to make 100 three-pointers in a season. And when Danny Ainge retired, he was the leading three-point maker in the postseason. When he retired, I don't remember what year he retired. It might have been 94 or something like that, whatever it was. But the year that he retired as the all-time leader in playoff three-pointers made in the history of the game, guys. That was Danny Ainge. The guy was out there, and he was money. I told you, he was a 3-and-D type of player, man, Danny Ainge. But they'll tell you he's a slow and athletic white guy. So, yes, guys, as you can see, man, if it wasn't for the ABA introducing the three-point line, if it wasn't for the NBA bringing the three-point line into the 80s, and if it wasn't for these players utilizing the three-point shot in a way that did not hurt the NBA, that kept the game popular, which allowed for guys to be specialists at the three-point line, or guys to be a specialty of theirs to shoot the three. When I talk about specialists, guys, right? I mentioned guys like Craig Hodges or the Trent Tuckers. These are specialists, right? They're specialists at catching, shooting, right? Or coming off screens and shooting, right? They're knockdown shooters. When you think about someone like a Reggie Miller wasn't a specialist. What his specialty was shooting. His specialty was shooting, but he wasn't a specialist because Reggie Miller could come off the dribble. He could come off of screens. He could get you in a triple threat position. He could fake you and go to the hole and finish. No, Reggie Miller wasn't a high flyer per se, but he could go to the hole and dunk it. Trent Tucker's not doing that. Craig Hodges is not doing that. These specialists are not doing that. Reggie Miller's specialty was shooting threes, right? It's Miller time. He was known as the three-point shooter of the 90s, But that was not his, he wasn't a specialist in that. You understand what I'm saying, guys? That was a specialty of his, was shooting. But he gets you in the mid-range. Like I say, he can come off the dribble. Most specialists at three-point shooting are not coming off the dribble. That's why they're specialists. They're catch and shoot guys. They come in the game, you can't leave them open. Hand down, man down. Same thing with the high flyers I've talked about before, right? Guys are specialists. Some guys just use, their specialty was high flying, right? I talked about guys like a Kendall Gill or a Stacey Augmon. These guys use their athleticism, their high fly ability, and that's what they specialized in. Right, were there other high flyers? Michael Jordan was a high flyer, but he didn't just specialize in high flying. Michael Jordan wasn't just all dunks. No, Michael Jordan had a well-rounded game. He played defense, other things he did, right? So he didn't just, it wasn't as a specialist in dunking or high flying. Clyde Drexler was a high flyer, but he did other things. He was a rebounder. He had an overall game, right? He didn't just use his athleticism or his high flying ability to be effective. He did other things. Dominique Wilkins was a high flyer, but that just wasn't how it was a specialist of his. No, he did other things. He could rebound, right? He did other things. He had other things in his game. He wasn't just all dunking. So now what do we have now in the NBA? Everyone is just chugging up threes now. Everyone believes that their specialty is shooting threes. Everyone thinks they're Steph Curry. Everyone thinks they're Reggie Miller or Ray Allen when they're not. So now what do you have? The fake fans telling us these guys are more talented, they're more skilled because everyone's shooting threes. That does not make you more skilled because these guys are not effective at shooting threes. The guys that I grew up watching, I told you in the 80s and the 90s, there were stretch stretch fours and stretch fives. There were big men like Bill Laimbeer that could step out and hit shots. Guys like Detlef Schrempf, right? Guys like Brad Lohaus. Some of these guys can step out, hit these shots. The Sam Perkinses of the world, right? These big guys can step out and hit the shots. We think about later on in the 90s, guys like Tracy Murray, Donyell Marshall, some of these guys that came in the late 90s into the 2000s, right? These big men that could stretch the floor. But it was all throughout the NBA's history, guys. There were big men that could stretch the floor. The difference was, I would tell you, they did not shoot 8, 9, 10 threes a game. They shot 3 or 4 a game. So they had to be more effective shooting those threes. But the reason why they shot them is because they were shooters. They could shoot the ball. These guys today are not shooters, but they still shoot 7, 8, 9, 10 threes, even though they're not shooters. And this is why the game is whack. Everyone thinks shooting 35%, 36% is doing something. It's not doing something when you're shooting 10 threes. I'm not impressed. Not impressed at all, guys. And this goes to the problem with the game right now. So once again, where's the NBA today without the previous era, without them bringing in the three-point line from the ABA? Where's the NBA today, guys? Where would the NBA be? You know what it would be? You'd be watching 80s and 90s basketball because you would have guys doing more what? Mid-range shooting. Guys more developing the mid-range, developing post games, right? Developing other ways to score without a three-point shot, right? That would cut down on the spacing of the game, wouldn't it? These guys would be dealing with a lot tighter situations. Then they would start to see what we're talking about in these previous eras, right? So you guys know the deal, man. Once again, the three-point line has destroyed the NBA because everyone believes they're a three-point shooter now. There's no balance in the game anymore. Whereas in the 80s and the 90s, when the three-point line first was introduced, guys, there was still balance there. These guys did not abuse it, right? They didn't abuse it. They did not just stand out there in the three-point line. Remember what Michael Jordan said, I don't want to just stand out there in the three-point line because what? Then that's all you do. You end up just looking for three-pointers, standing on the three-point line, and then hurt your overall game, which what in turn hurts the NBA's overall game. Everyone's doing the same thing now. So how is it exciting? Right? And there's the problem we had. I told you guys, we think about the All-Star game again. Look at the NBA All-Star game, guys. It was an absolute joke. And why was it a joke? Because all these guys did was shoot up three-pointers from half court, and they believe that's exciting? How is it exciting? It's not exciting. All they do is carry the ball and usually traveling violations. It's not the same. I'm not impressed. Because I told you, we watched actual basketball players actually play basketball. They did the right way. They played with the love of the game. They had heart. They had grit. And they had the fundamentals, right? And they were held to higher standards. The referees blew the whistle on these guys more regularly. The standards are not there anymore. That's why I told you, we must hold the standards, uphold the standards. That's not being upheld. So you guys know, man, where would this ever be at the three-point line, guys, if it wasn't previous eras? They want to say we're done with the 90s. They want to say we're done with this era, we're done with that era, or these guys couldn't play basketball. If it wasn't for those guys, the pioneers, the guys who paved the way, guys who had the three-point line implemented, right? If they abused it and made the game the way it is now, we wouldn't be where we are right now, guys. Think about that. Think about the NBA. Those guys are the reason why the NBA is even around today. Right? If it wasn't for guys like Dr. J and Magic and Bird and Michael Jordan and all these other guys that came after them, then there would be no NBA today. If Magic Johnson, Larry Bird, and all these other guys were just standing on the three-point line, chucking up threes all game long, and they didn't have the well-rounded games, the creativity like that, then what would the game be today, guys? It would be nowhere. The game wouldn't have went global if Michael Jordan, his era, were outside of the three-point line, just chucking up threes all game long. If everybody wanted to be Reggie Miller in the 90s, the game would be whack. Right? It would not be global because people would be like, yo, I'm not watching this stuff. It wouldn't appeal to most people. It would only appeal to a certain group of people who value the three-point shot. And that's what you get now. The only people who enjoy this era are either the LeBron James fans or fans of what? I just talked about, the scoring. These guys are scoring more. That's it. They're not really fans of the NBA or basketball because what we're watching today, guys, is not real basketball. It's not. The game is not well-rounded. You're not going to get people from different walks of life watching basketball now. You're going to get one group of people watching the game. Whereas before, I told you, there were different things that you could be drawn to. You guys know the deal, man. If it wasn't for the previous eras implementing the three-point line and utilizing it in a way to help it be successful to today, this era with NBA would not exist, guys. But yet they want to continue to crap on the previous eras and make it seem like these guys couldn't shoot, they couldn't dribble, they couldn't run, they couldn't jump, they couldn't play defense, they couldn't score, they couldn't do anything better than the guys today. The game today is a joke. They're just chucking up three-point shots, and the only reason they're able to do this is because of previous eras, guys. Where would the NBA be today with a three-point line, guys? Where would it be? You guys know the deal, man. I'll catch you guys on the next one.